Well, Robert, everybody knows you as Rob from McDojoLife, which is hilarious because I would try to find your last name and it's just like, no, it's Rob from McDojoLife is in with us today, and let's welcome him. How
Yeah,
are you,
man.
man?
What's up? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so for people who don't know what McDojoLife is, what is it? Can you explain in a few
Yeah,
words?
it's a brand, but I call out fakes, frauds, phonies, and pedophiles in the martial arts industry.
Oh, even pedophiles make the list. Interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's actually we have a rule because McDojo is a word that's tossed around quite a bit, and so in order to be able to fight something, you have to be able to define it. So without giving a clear definition of what something is, how could you be against it? And
Mm-hmm.
so what I did was when I started McDojo Life, I started the basis of what have now become the five rules of what I consider a McDojo, which is one is pedophiles, which there is an astronomical amount of pedophilia in the martial arts industry. If you
Wow.
need proof of that, go to truthaboutmartialarts.weebly.com and you'll be able to see a list of nothing but people who have been arrested in the martial arts industry for pedophilia. So that's one. People who lie about their belt rank and fight record, because if they'll lie about that, they'll probably lie about anything else. Um, Shady business practices or cult like behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if somebody's financially ripping somebody off, that's an issue. And cult like behavior goes with that because people trying to do that to you, strong arm you that way, they kind of make you feel like you're obligated to do maybe sometimes some things that you might not necessarily want to do for the sake of the greater good. So that's very cult like. Then you have no touch knockouts or mislabeling techniques. So obviously you can't knock people out with their mind. And as much as we want to think that people don't believe this, I promise you there are plenty of people that do, especially in Indonesia, where people love to toss around Tenaga Dalam, but mislabeling techniques is a much bigger issue because that happens all the time. You go into a cardio kickboxing class, you're punching the bag, and somebody's trying to convince you that you're going to be the next Floyd Mayweather. It's just not true. Cardio kickboxing and kickboxing are different things. Will you learn some techniques? Sure, you will. Will it make you a little better than the average person who's never trained ever? Sure, it will. Will it? Is it designed for self defense? No, it's not. And then what was the final one? Shady, but unsafe training practices. So like you see these videos all the time of instructors with a stick, and if you do something wrong, they crack you with a stick, or they line their students up and punch them in the head to condition their head, which isn't how that works whatsoever. Or sparring on concrete without headgear, which is dumb because I've seen way too many people die because of that, especially because of the page. And so there's all these rules, but none of those apply to a lot of the trivial issues that most people have in the martial arts. Like, oh, well, this guy got his black belt quick. So did BJ Penn. That's a guideline, not a rule. Or they go, oh, well, that guy charges too much. Well, that's subjective. Like how much somebody can afford and how much they can't isn't up for you to decide because the other guy across the street is doing financially better than you. That doesn't make him a McDojo. So I tried to narrow it down to those five rules. So that way it has nothing to do with your art. It has nothing to do with how long it takes you to get a belt or anything trivial. It has everything to do with basically what is and what is not legally detrimental, I guess you could say. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's definitely about legality more than it is about nitpicking little things that aren't that important.
And you have a lot of fascinating short clips on your Instagram page, which I'm going to link here, and probably people already seen it or listed, and your YouTube, right? Is there any other places where people can find you?
Yeah, I'm on. I was on Facebook until I got booted, so I'm trying real hard to get my Facebook back.
By
Um,
who? It's just you had too many complaints from.
Well, like the weird thing is on YouTube, if you have a strike, YouTube on the back end tells you, hey, you have this strike. It'll be X amount of time before we allow you to post again. And then that strike will be there for X amount of time until it goes away. Well,
Mhm.
Facebook didn't seem to do that. Facebook didn't seem to take their strikes and make them go away. They were just cumulative. So whether you had seven strikes in a month or whether you have seven strikes over the course of 30 years, it doesn't really seem to matter because once you hit that seven, no matter how long the time has passed between them, they still give you the boot. And so it was like when I first started Facebook, understanding copyright law was something I had to kind of figure out. And so you make mistakes along the way. And so that's pretty much where we are right now, which sucked. I had like over 115,000 followers at the time when we got kicked off.
And we say we, it's not, you're not by yourself, somebody else within your team?
When I say we, I try to make sure that I talk about McDojoLife as being more than me. It's
Mm.
not about me. It's not about I. It's about the community. It's about people who help. There's been a lot of people that helped me along the way. The production team here has helped me along the way. There's always a we. There's always more than just myself.
And all these clips, all this stuff, where do you get it? Do people send it to you, or are you sitting next to the computer all day long and trying to find something?
Well, I sit next to my phone all day long. That's for damn sure. The internet is a crazy place that exists 24 hours a day, whether you like it or not. And so, am I by my? I'm probably like I probably work. I don't know, 15 hours a day or something like that. Like when I
Oh,
get
that's a
up,
lot, okay.
the first thing I do is get on my phone. The last thing I do before I fall asleep is I'm on my phone. But that's because it operates on online, and so now it's a little bit more tricky because we're doing other things. But whenever I'm done with that, I go straight to my room and I go right back to it. Um, so it's weird. Like I will have to say, driving through the mountains is kind of awesome around here because then you like lose connection. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't get to work. Good luck. But yeah, man, it's a lot of work, but at the same time, I have a lot of support, which is again why I like to say we, because people send me stuff all the time. I get sent tons of stuff, and then you start to learn the players, you start to learn the organizations, you start to learn who the instructors and the coaches are, and then you start to have like these breadcrumbs that are all around you all the time.
So back in the 70s and 80s, when you saw these martial arts movies and there weren't any dojos around, I can see why people would fall for it. Somebody would pretend to, people put a gi on them, on themselves, put a black belt, and I see why people would probably believe in this stuff. But now you can see mixed martial arts on TV like every other day. You see dojos all over. Like, how do people all fall for this nonsense?
Well, I have a couple different theories. We've actually, because we're filming the movie, people who fall into cults are actually typically intelligent people. They're educated. They're doctors, lawyers. They're not people who are dumb. And then from what we've been talking with, like with the James Randi Foundation and with psychologists, what we've really kind of come to, and reading and researching, what we've really come to find out is that no matter who you are, you could probably be at some point in your life susceptible to falling into a cult. None of us are free of that. We as people just want to be a part of something. We do. We want to be a part of a group or an organization or something we stand for. It's just natural for you to want to do. And sometimes the stars align in your life where you're looking for something and then someone comes along to fill that void. And when they do, man, you're all in because they're exactly what you needed at that time. Now, how long that might last or, how passionate you are about that might be different, but you're still all in at that moment. It's kind of like a girlfriend, like you're, oh man, I'm single. You go find a girl, and then that person fills that gap in your life for a short period of time, or maybe a long period of time, maybe forever. But at some point, you were looking for that, and then when they came along, they were able to fill that whatever that need was. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, well, this is exactly what I wanted. But we're not, that could be anything. That could be absolutely anything in our life. It could be spirituality. It could be physical fitness. It could be mentorship or friends. It could be anything. And then when someone comes along that says, hey, I can provide this for you, it's very tempting. And it's very hard sometimes to see past that honeymoon stage of a relationship, no matter what it is. Um, yeah. So
It's fascinating that like people who don't know a lot about what you do, they might think that you're just a meme account or something, but you're actually putting together a documentary with psychologists talking about this stuff and professionals talking about this stuff. Like, tell me about this documentary.
So I've never done anything with McDojoLife that wasn't asked of me by the people who follow it. So like I created the logo for McDojoLife just because somebody randomly was like, "Hey man, you should make t-shirt." I wear it. And I was like, "Oh, well, I guess I should maybe put a logo out that I would wear." And so I did. And then somebody was like, "Man, you should make some rash guards and stuff." So we did. And every time I've done something for McDojoLife, it was based on what the community asked me to do. Like I said, this is hopefully a community project and it's bigger than me. I hope we all want to clean up martial arts. I hope we all want it to stay a place that we can all continue to enjoy without having con artists around every corner. But because it's not regulated in any way at all, that means that it's a safe haven for a lot of con artists. And so one thing people have asked me all the time was, how come one, which is why I started the page, was how come no one does anything about this? And two, why doesn't somebody just go in there and beat them up? Which I think is the dumbest idea in the world. Like, when you look at the truth campaign that happened in the 90s, you get like a group of people who got together and started just spreading information about smoking. It was a very big deal, right? These truth commercials came out, and it was like these really like vivid and hard hitting stories that were really short and compact into a commercial, but they were enough to make you go, damn, maybe I don't want to smoke. What they didn't do was go to the head of like a tobacco company and punch him in the face 15 times. Like that wouldn't have solved any problems, nor does it usually solve any problems unless the problem is happening to you. Like if somebody's punching you, yes, punching them back may be the problem, solve the problem. But like when it comes down to like spreading information, that's so much more important, because if you can get to the root of the problem, you can actually start working on solving it. So like the root of the problem is that people don't know a lot about martial arts because we just don't know what we don't know. And so, and that's based on the four stages of learning anyway. Like you have to have that stage in learning. Like there are four stages of learning. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
So there's unconscious incompetence, which means you don't know something. When you're a baby, you don't know how to drive a car. You don't even know that a car exists. So how do you know you don't know how to drive a car? So that's unconscious incompetence. And you have conscious incompetence, meaning I know I don't know how to do something. So then you're a baby and you go, oh, that's a car. I learned the word car. I learned that a car does this. I'm aware I don't know how to use it though. Then you have conscious competence, meaning, okay, I'm learning how to drive. But when it feels like when you learn how to drive, you're like, check the mirror, put on the seatbelt, 10 and 2, right? You have to actually think about it. But then after a while, you have unconscious competence, meaning you just do it. You've done it so many times, you don't have to think about it. You just do it. Kind of like buttoning up your shirt or tying your shoe. You just do it, right? And so it's the same thing with anyone learning anything. You have to start off like everyone else, which is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, And so when people start martial arts, the only thing that they really know is that they don't know. So what do? They trust the person that they're going to give them information from a clean slate. And they're saying, yo, I trust you, and I would really like for you to give me that knowledge that I don't have. And so they fall for pretty much anything at that point. I mean, the one question people know to ask when they join a martial arts studio is, how much does it cost?
Yeah.
That's it. They don't know about lineages and how important that is. They don't know about like, adrenaline dumps quite yet. They only know from their own experiences, and maybe that will help them have a better guideline. But when somebody comes to you with something in a field that you don't know anything about, they provide you with this information. It sounds good. So you go with it because, hey, that makes sense. I guess I can go with that. But you can be fooled. And so the goal with the documentary is to take that information of people just not knowing and hopefully give them some more ammo. So when they do join a martial arts school, they know how to ask, what to ask for, red flags to look for. And hopefully that'll guide them to make better, more informed, educated decisions on joining a school that they could put years of their life into. Statistically, at least 1 year.
So let's talk about this fake gurus or whatever you call them, like martial arts practitioners. So can we divide them into categories, like the person who clearly a con artist, and are there any of them just delusional freaks who believe in their own nonsense?
According to the psychologist, yes. We talked to a psychologist the other day, and I guess there's a point somewhere in there, and I'm not a psychologist, so that's why I keep referring to what I do know. But it seems like there are definitely people out there who are quite aware that they are con artists. Like, for instance, an example is James Heydrich. James Heydrich in the 80s was considered the best psychic in the world, was what he was considered. Now, he was lying and he was conning people, and it was a scam. And he was busted by James Randi during a game, like during a show. Like they brought him up. He said that he can move things with his mind. James Randi said, well, I'll pay you if you can do it. I'll pay you a large sum of money. And then he was like, he did it. And then James Randi was like, well, I think I figured this out. and I think I figured out what you're doing. And he put packing peanuts around the book. And then obviously James Hydrick couldn't do it because the experiment was that he was blowing air through his mouth, but no one could see it because it's a magic trick. But he was able to use that to gain followers in his martial arts studios because he had this, that was like kind of his shtick. And the most interesting thing about that was he was well aware that what he was doing was magic. He knew that it was magic. And we actually interviewed him for our documentary, and he was extremely helpful. And I can't help the things that he's done in his past, nor do I excuse the things that he's done in his past. But what I can say for Hydrick was he was willing to help us because we told him, hey, we think that since you were probably one of the best con artists in the martial arts industry ever, that you would provide us with some great insight on how to bust other con artists. And he was like, you know what? I would love to do that. And he did. He gave us a 2-hour interview. You know, we had to go through the state because he is in a correctional facility to do so, but he was willing to do that. So, like I said, I can't excuse any of his behavior, and nor do I justify any of his behavior before. But what I can say was, at least for this project, he was willing to help us do a deep dive into how other people are probably taking advantage of people. But he's an example of somebody, the reason I brought him up, of somebody who knows that they were conning people. And then you have somebody like a George Dillman, who I think, and I could be wrong, maybe he does know he's conning people, but I think the delusion has gone so far that I really do think that that man probably believes he can knock people out with his mind. I think that he really does think that he has these types of powers. Even though it's been debunked time and time and time again, that doesn't mean that he's stopped doing what he's doing. And so I think the problem with a lot of people is they're trying to stop the man or the figure. You might not stop the man or the figure. What we should be focusing on instead of trying to stop the organization itself, stop people from joining the organization, and then the organization will crumble because there's no more members. So that's just the long game approach that I'm taking with it.
So speaking of these members, all this stuff that they show, not possible without people, right? Like all these touchless knockouts. Like I'm a student. I came there to learn. Why do I participate in all this nonsense? Is it some peer pressure for me to pretend that I'm being knocked out, or is it hypnosis? What is it?
Well, maybe I can help you out with an example. So, you're in California. You were telling me you were in California. So,
Yeah.
you know, when you go into a grocery store, when you walk into a grocery store, if you walk typically, this isn't every grocery store, but most grocery stores, if you walk around the outside rim of the grocery store, that's usually the stuff that's good for you. You got your produce section, you got your fresh meats, you got breads and grains. All that stuff is usually on the outside. When you start walking into the aisles, that's when you start getting into the prepackaged garbage, right? You start getting into the cereal aisle and the canned goods and all that good stuff, right? So you walk around this entire place, usually, most people, right? Unless you just know what you want, get in and get out. I ain't that way. When I go to the grocery store, I go to the grocery store. I buy everything I need for a long period of time, so I'm ready to go, right? So I go in and I do my thing. Then we get to the cash register. And once we get to the cash register, right beside the cash register, in every grocery store I've ever been to, there's things there. It's candy, maybe a cookie, you know, maybe some soda right there. They got a little refrigerator. And then you grab one of those things and you buy it. Now, the items that you bought right there are twice as much, if not 3 times as much as the items that were inside the store. There's a soda there, like a little, you know, maybe a little tiny can of soda. That particular soda, maybe that bottle of soda cost you $3. Where if you would have went back in there, you would have had a case of 12 for $5. So logically, if you really wanted that, you would have purchased it back there where it would have been cheaper and you would have gotten more, but you didn't do that. Whose idea was it for you to pick up that soda?
Mine? Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
So
if it was your idea, you would have done the logical thing, went back into the store during when you were shopping, picked up the soda you would have wanted on your list, put it in your cart and bought it. You didn't buy it inside the store. You bought it when you were about to leave the store when it was more convenient for you. Some genius years and years ago figured that if they took all of these items and put them right next to the register, that people would go, you know what? Maybe I am thirsty. Maybe I do want a candy bar. Maybe I do want this. And they sell a ton of them. That's not your idea. That goes against every probably smart principle in your head. It costs you more, it's not good for you, and you're not getting as much for your dollar. But you do it anyway because you think it's your idea. It's not. Somebody did that thinking for you already. But we want to think it's our idea, right? We have this free will. Oh man, I made that decision. I'm the man. I have my 2 liter soda. No, because if you were smart, you would have gone back in. You would have gotten your pack of 12 for far less and gotten more. But we don't do that. So it's very similar to that. Brainwashing takes place in a lot of different forms, and it's not as hard to brainwash people as you think. It's actually extremely easy to brainwash people because they think it's their idea.
So going back to these guys who just fall when they supposedly touched by how do they call this little thing, that imaginary ball, whatever that hell is? They think they really got hit by something.
Well, they think it's their idea. They think it's their idea, either whether to go along with it or they think that it's really happening to them, but they do believe it at the time. Even if they just go with it, right? They've already processed why they're going with it. Like in any cult, half the battle is I bring you away from all the other things that are going on in your life. And I make what your life is about this cult. These are your friends now. This is your family now. This is your hobby now. This is your life now, and it revolves around this cult. Now, you have to make a decision when this time comes. Do you say, I do that to you, let's say when you're 3 years in, 4 years in, maybe hell, maybe in 5, 6 years in. And we don't do that stuff to you until about 5 years in. Up to that point, everything else seemed good. But now this is your life. These are your friends. This is your family, and then all of a sudden they bring you up in front of the class and they're like, you immediately have to make a decision. Do I go along with this? And if I go along with this, I kind of look silly, but I get to keep all my internal structures here. I get to keep my family. I get to keep my friends. I get to have good standing with the organization. I get to get promoted. Or do I throw all of that 5 years away and walk away? That's not as easy a decision as people want to think that it is. That's a very difficult decision for a lot of people. And so we want to think it's just, well, that's ridiculous. Yeah, but you're not looking at this from the long game. This wasn't something that got brought up to you on day one. This is something that got ingrained in you over a long period of time. And then they bring you into the secret technique. For instance, we went for the documentary to a Bujinkan school. Bujinkan is ninjutsu. And they do something called the Saki test, which is when you get your 5th degree test, you must sit down in front of your peers on your knees in a seiza position or crisscross position. And someone stands behind you with like a shinai, which is like a bamboo stick sword, or with some type of a stick. And they're supposed to come down on top of you and crack you in the head. Now, you're not doing this until your 5th degree black belt test. But what you're supposed to do is, without seeing them, you're supposed to use your sense, like your 6th sense, as they say, and feel that person's intent and dive out of the way before you get cracked on the head with a stick. Now, anybody logical knows that if I'm behind you with a stick, I'm going to crack you on the head with that stick 10 out of 10 times, right? But this isn't the first day. This is your 5th degree black belt test. You're years into this. You've already been ingrained into this. So it's not like this just appears to you. And again, this is a room full of your peers, most of them buying into it. So what do? Well, you already know that that's going to be a part of your test. So why did you even show up to the test if you didn't want to go with it? And so it's much deeper than people want to make it. It's much more difficult than that.
Is there such a thing as ninjutsu, or is it just the BS stuff based on the movies?
People call it ninjutsu, but there's like Budo Taijutsu. There's different schools of thought. You have like Stephen Hayes, I think it is. I could be saying his name wrong, but he's one organization. Then you have Hatsumi Sensei, who runs the Bujinkan. So is it real? I don't fucking know. Or do I care? What I care about is it practical? Is it in terms of real for me? I think real has to do with what your goals are, personal. So like if I go to a cardio kickboxing class, right? And then I talk to a Muay Thai specialist or a Lethaway guy, and I go, yo, man, I did some kickboxing and I lost like 15 pounds. It depends on the type of person you are, how you respond. Am I going to be a dick because that guy doesn't have my goals? No. So what? He can't fight. That wasn't his goal. He could care less if he knows how to fight. Does that make it not real? Well, it makes it real for him because that's his goal. And so I think that that's really important for people to understand is not everyone joins martial arts because of the reason you joined martial arts. And so when you look at these guys who LARP, they're doing the role playing and they're dressing up like ninjas. I think that that's fine as long as they're aware that that's all that really is. You're role playing, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's mislabeling. You cannot sense when a magic stick is going to crack you in the head, right? Because if that was true, right, what the reason I brought up the Bujinkan thing was, if that was true, when we went and met with a 15th degree black belt of the Bujinkan.
15th.
It's the highest ranking. Yeah, that's right. Ridiculous as that is, right? He's one of the highest ranking members of the Bujinkan, right? And since he was one of the highest ranking members of the Bujinkan, we asked him, hey, can we see the Saki test? He goes, oh, I'm not a high enough rank for that, which is bullshit. You're the highest rank, right? And so we talked about it. And he was like, well, that's specially selected by. So like the mysticism of it all is brought out and it's hidden and it's not as upfront as people would be. And like, let's say a jiu-jitsu academy. I go to a jiu-jitsu academy and I ask a black belt to show me a technique. He will show me the technique. It'll be that. There won't too many years. You are not ready, grasshopper. Secret technique must be hidden. Like none of that shit. They go, okay. And then you either learn it or you don't. Either you practice it or you don't. Either you get better at it or you don't. Right? Because it's such an individualized thing that's not like this hive mind where we have to hide the secret technique of the universe. Like, no, that doesn't exist. It's bullshit. But people like to feel that way sometimes, right? And that's the appeal of these cults, right? They get to be in on something that no one else is in on. They have this appeal of this mysticism of kung fu movies. It's bullshit. It's funny and it's bullshit, but they feel like they're gaining something from that. And I think that that's fine as long as they're not being lied to, which is what's actually happened.
So I've read that you actually get threats from people who you very much expose. Like, is that true? Like people.
Yeah, actually, hold on. I have a death threat I got the other day. Let's see.
What are they gonna do with the fake martial art? They're gonna pursue you or what?
Well, like what? See, this is another common misconception. Like, again, life is not a meme page. Life is not a quick 1-minute post. You have to remember, some of these people are mentally ill people who belong to a cult. Do you think that they would chi-ball me, or do you think they would shoot me or stab me?
Give me a second. So you said that they're mentally ill, but at the same time, you said that there are doctors and lawyers who.
I said some are mentally ill.
Gotcha,
yes,
gotcha.
Some of these people are mentally ill. And I do think that there is a little bit of an issue when it comes to being in a cult. I do think that people who belong to cults do have some type of issue at the time, and they are filling that hole with something. But then again, like I also said, I am not a psychologist.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is they are just people. And so why would anybody attack me with a chi ball? Like, that's not a real threat. Like, that's a funny threat and it sounds good on paper, but that's not like how I'm getting threatened. I'm like, when I was in London, which is weird as a place as it was in London. I'm still trying to find that thing for you. I'll find it because it's funny. It is a funny threat, but like, as weird as it was, so I was in London for a seminar. I got hired out to teach a nunchuck seminar out there. And so I was like, cool, I'll go. And then I was like, since I'll be in London, you know what? I'll be out there for 2 weeks, because instead of just going there and coming back, it's a long flight. I'll enjoy myself. So the place hired me out. I taught the nunchuck seminar. Well, on the weekend before I left on a Monday. They had a Taekwondo tournament that their school was doing on a Saturday. They were like, hey, man, you should come out. What else do I got to do? So, of course, I go. And when I'm there, it was like this beautiful, giant YMCA out there. And I was like, oh, crap, like this is like a really nice building. Like, and then I'm sitting in the stands, and everything in a martial arts tournament's hurry up and wait. You sit, you do a whole bunch of nothing until somebody comes up, right? So I get a random message on my phone, and it was from somebody who obviously just made or has a troll account. No followers, followed no one, no posts, no picture, nothing. And then all they wrote to me was what I was wearing. That was it.
Oh, wow.
And so I was sitting there like, well, that's creepy. And I can't sit there and say it's not the first time that's happened, but usually my response is the same. Hey, man, you can just come over and say, hey, we'll chit chat, right? And then they wrote me about an incident that happened. So years ago, when I first started McDojoLife, I started McDojoLife with long form essays. So what I would do is I would go on there, I would write out all these long form essays about these things that were wrong with certain organizations. And one of them happened to be an organization that was housing a pedophile. The pedophile owned the school. The school was doing really, really well. I figured people should be aware that this person was a pedophile. I post about it. Immediately, the people that I did have follow at the time went over there and just started ripping through their reviews, putting reviews on Google, putting reviews on Facebook. I mean, this is years ago. And then they just like ripped through them. And next thing you know, that school actually closed. Never heard from the guy. He disappeared. Right. Well, a couple years after that, I get another message from somebody saying, hey, isn't this that guy that you had shut down not too long, like a couple years back? And I was like, I looked, I was like, he looks really familiar. I go back and sure as shit, that was the same guy. I was like, oh my God. So I write a thing about that on Facebook. That one gets shut down. Well, the location was in London. So here I am years later, and I'm sitting down and somebody writes me, and it's one of that person's students. And they're telling me, like, writing about this in detail about how I was a bad person and how I misunderstood that person and how he was a good man. Like, I had proof this guy was a real legitimate pedophile. And I got his school shut down, and this person was mad at me. And now this was a weird threat, and it was all very creepy because I'm in a room full of like 1,000 people or more, and this person's in here somewhere, and I have no clue who they are. So like that's a problem. That's a scary problem. I don't give a shit what kind of martial arts you know. You're not a psychic, and so I don't know who this person is. And so they sent me a message letting me know that as soon as I left the tournament, they were going to shoot me. Now that's a strange threat in London, but getting a threat like that is weird anyway. And I knew that like, man, it's still possible. Is it likely? Maybe not, but it was enough to make me feel uneasy. So I went down, I talked to the police that were there, off-duty police officers helping with the tournament. And I was like, yo, dude, I got this threat. And they were like, let's be honest, there's really not much that we can do about this. They were like, but what we can do is when you go to leave with us and we'll escort you to your vehicle. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's what happened. And nothing ever came from that. But that's much different than a chi ball. You know, that's not a
Yeah.
chi ball. That's somebody who knew where I was, had the intent of harming me. And now luckily nothing came from it. But they could have easily done absolutely anything they wanted to me. And I would have never really seen it coming or done anything about it. So like some death threats, yeah, they're funny. But which one do you take seriously and which one don't you? Because the one you don't take seriously is the one that might be followed through with.
Yeah. So why did you start like, and why are you so committed to it? Because most of the people, even if they started it, as soon as they got a threat or two, they probably, okay, screw this. Like, what do I get from it? Like, what do you get from it? Is it something that you're on a personal mission for this? Something happened to you? Somebody ripped you off, or some stuff like that? Or you just like, hey, there's some weird stuff going on in the world, and I can change it.
I mean, it just seemed like the right thing to do. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I have no like I've been doing the martial arts now for 23 years of my life, actually coming up on 24 in April, because I always mark it because my first martial arts lesson was a gift for my birthday.
Oh,
So
nice.
I can mark it very easily. Thank you. Luckily. But when it comes down to doing the right thing, I don't think that we need a deep reason to do the right thing. And I only started McDojoLife as a side hobby. Like it's now my full-time job, and I didn't expect it to be a job. I didn't think that you could make a career off of doing this, but apparently you can. I'm doing it. But it all started from a conversation I had with a student. It was just a random one-off conversation. I was teaching at a jiu-jitsu academy at the time. I was a blue belt, and I worked the desk. The instructor called me and he said, hey man, I'm not feeling very well, which I knew he wasn't for sure because this dude never called out. And I was like, dude, you all right? Like I'm concerned. So then he was like, hey, can you do me a favor? Just do a couple techniques and then let them spar. I was like, yeah, not a problem. I could do that. So I taught the class that day because the instructor was sick. And we had a guy in the class who it was only his second class ever. Like he came for the trial. He signed up. This is his first official class as a member. And so after class was over, because this was a noon class, most of the guys didn't really work, or they worked from home or they worked for themselves. So they didn't really have anywhere to go in a rush. So we just stood around shooting the shit. We're talking randomly. And then someone brought up McDojos and we started talking about McDojos casually because everybody knew what those were. Then everyone goes to leave. I go to lock the door so I can leave so I can come back later for the night classes. And the last guy, the guy who had only been there for 2 classes ever, he stopped me and he goes, hey man, I'm a little embarrassed. He goes, I don't know what a McDojo is. And he goes, I go, oh, well, that's not a problem. So I explained to him what my version of what a McDojo was, because everybody has their own version. And he goes, huh, that's interesting. He goes, how come nobody does anything about that? And then he left. And then I thought about it. I was like, that's a good question. I'm like, that's a really good question. And so like I went home, and then that night I just kept echoing in my head, why doesn't anybody do anything about that? And then the more I thought about it, I was like, there is no regulating body to the martial arts industry. I was like, over the years, by that time, I had already been in the martial arts for quite a while. I was like, I had already seen some really shady things go down in all aspects, from gear companies ripping people off, which is what I'm dealing with literally right now,
I saw your
to
Instagram. It's all over it. Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, then you have people who are teaching techniques that couldn't possibly work to people who believe it way more than they should, meaning that they'll actually try that if it ever comes up. Now, what are those odds? Probably not great, but if they do, wouldn't you rather have the gun than the sponge? You know what I'm saying? And so basically, what these instructors are doing is they're giving their students a sponge and saying, this is going to defend your life. Meanwhile, all the instructors with guns are going, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. But you know what? I'll just keep teaching my class and not worry about that. Well, what happens is when you ignore those type of things, they breed, because they're not being stifled. They're not being stopped. No one seems to give a shit, because they're like, it's so dumb. How can anyone believe it? Well, the problem is that people are willing to believe just about anything to fit in, to be a part of something. And so that's kind of what happens, and it breeds. And then you get things like what happens in Indonesia, where I see kids like literally cutting themselves accidentally because they believe in this special power. Kids run over by trucks and killed, which, by the way, is in our sizzle reel that we posted for our documentary. Like, people seriously get hurt, die, get raped, get financially ripped off, get permanent mental damage from being in cults that they have to go to psychologists for the rest of their life. Like, there's a lot of problems in the martial arts industry that seems to be ignored by all these so-called holier than thou, I'm honorable people. Like, that's bullshit. If you were so honorable, then why are you allowing this shit in your industry? Why do you turn a blind eye to fix your students? Your students are going to be fine. You already know that. But what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about a guy like David Arnebeck? David Arnebeck owns 3 martial arts studios today, and he pled guilty to molesting a 15-year-old girl in his own home. He raped a girl in his home, and then he took a plea deal, and he was not put on a sex offender registry, and he still works with children today. But yet people just like, oh, you know what? I'll just work on my students and they'll be okay. Yeah, that's great. You just ignore and pretend that that shit doesn't go down every day. And what happens? Because it goes unchecked, because no one steps up to the plate to call it out, that it just continues to grow and flourish. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the community and how it's turned out recently, where it seems like more people are taking stands against this bullshit. Because if you don't self-regulate, like any other industry, eventually someone will come in to regulate it for you. And then it becomes corrupt and fucking useless. And that's not what I want with this. I want the industry to stay wholesome and good and primarily decent. You'll always have assholes, right? But hopefully we'll have more people out there going, hey, there's an asshole over there, instead of, he's just Steve. Like, no, he's not just Steve. Like, it's somebody's fucking it up for everybody. And I think that we should squash that when we can, not, and by the way, I don't mean just making fun of people or bullying people. I don't think that that's smart. If they're doing something illegal, if they're doing something that is detrimental, that will cause harm to students, that should be called out.
It's crazy. Like, all this time, I thought you just making fun of people. I didn't think you have this big mission or anything to take seriously. And now I'm completely changing the perspective on everything. Like, do you have like some sort of intern who would put together some database of the schools which are like mock dojos in your view? Because like, I've done martial arts back like, I think I have a good eye on bullshit, but how do I know that the guy is a former pedophile? Like, I want to take my kids to, I don't know, to train jujitsu or whatever stuff, and how do I know?
Well, I think there should be 2 standards that I wish every school would follow. This is just me personally, but I think that so much would change. Well, I think there are three things we should change, but I think so much would change if we just instilled two principles that are the easiest things in the world to do in the United States, because I don't know outside laws past the United States. But in the United States, I think that if we required all martial artists, whether they were a coach, staff, or owner, one, they should be local and federally background checked, period. You should have a background check on absolutely everyone who works for you in the martial arts industry. Because how do we know they're not a pedophile? Did you research? Did you check? Is it because you trust this person? Like, you should know, especially when it comes to people's safety. Two, everybody should be CPR certified, CPR first aid certified, period. If you are running a martial arts studio or a gym, that's physical, where people could be injured, you should be prepared for basic first aid safety. You should be prepared for that.
Tell me more about the second part. Like, how often are these incidents?
People get injured in martial arts studios all the time. Like, even little things, broken fingers. People get knocked out quite often in martial arts studios. People who have heart issues. Do you have a defibrillator on hand? Like, there's all these basic, like, I've broken my toes. I can't count you how many times. Concussions. There's a lot of things that could be handled that should be handled in-house pretty easily with basic first aid.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's a physical activity. I mean, I've seen people in jiu-jitsu schools fuck up shoulders, elbows, ACLs, ankles. I mean, it's a physical sport. I mean, you definitely should have some basic first aid.
Yeah, I kind of thought like a lot of times there is almost institutional knowledge how to deal with it when it comes to martial arts. Like somebody in the gym would know, but I guess it's not a good enough excuse.
I mean, it's a business. It's
Yeah.
a business. Like, it's kind of like if I went to my mechanic and I was like, hey man, can you fix that? And he'd be like, yeah, I'm sure somebody around here does that. Yeah, just leave your car here. Like,
Yeah.
it's our responsibility as instructors to take the reins on what should be going on in our studio. It's not up to us to hope that one of the students is a doctor. We should be prepared for what's going on. And it's very easy to do. Getting your CPR first aid certification is one of the easiest processes you can go through.
Yeah, it's one day. Yeah, I took it. Yeah, it's very easy.
And getting a background check, local and federal. Yeah, it costs you a little bit of dough, but it's better than having a pedophile in your studio. It's better than going and all of a sudden you find out that you have a convicted felon who all he does is steal for absolutely every job he's ever been at. That could have been very easily found out with a local federal background check.
So, is there anyone, or maybe someone in your agenda down the road to kind of push this type of narratives to local representation, saying like, "Hey, you, dear congressman, why don't you put this into your next bill?" Like,
so here's the thing, like we just talked about, right? Then that would be government regulation. So when you start getting into like government regulation, I'm not trying to get into conspiracy theories or anything like that, but what I am saying is, right now the community kind of self-regulates. Eventually what will happen is when you start kind of bringing in other outside entities, then it's no longer a self-regulating entity. That means that there's a straight up governing body. And that's always been the most tricky thing with the martial arts, is like there are a lot of different martial arts, right? And so how do you govern all martial arts in the United States with their nuances and what their particular needs are and their particular promotions are? And so do I think that should be required? Those two things should be required? Yes. Do I think that we should have a governing body for all martial arts? No. I think it should be self-regulated. And I think that it's our responsibility. And I know that people might not agree with this, but that's okay. Everybody has difference of opinion. But I think it's our responsibility as martial artists to educate people about martial arts. Like if I'm an instructor and somebody walks into my gym and they say, man, I really want to learn karate, but I'm teaching Taekwondo. Then the old school sales tactic would be, what is it about karate that you enjoy? And then whatever answer they give you, you just say, oh, well, we do that too. Like, that's not educating them. That's selling them. What you should say is, well, hey, man, I got a karate school right across the street. I'm tight with that dude. I know him. What I'll do is I'll get you his contact information. Since you're already here, would you like to at least try this? But we don't do that. It's all about the sale. It's all about my student. Even in jiu-jitsu, you have the term crianche, like a crianche.
You can't go to another school to train some stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's culty shit. That's cult. That's what a cult does. A cult tries to control you all the time. And so, like, if you can't go to another school, you basically now have a cult leader. That's what that is.
Yeah, to be fair, like jiu-jitsu is fantastic, but I do think these guys are very into into the uh
Some, not everybody. Not everybody does that. Like, my favorite instructors are the ones where you're like, hey, man, there's a seminar that I'd really like to go to, but a competing school is hosting it. And the instructor goes, you know what? Have fun. And then when you do me a favor, after you come back, show us some of the stuff you learned.
oh, that's cool.
That's an instructor. That's an instructor who gives a damn about you because you didn't pay him to be a part of a cult. You paid him to learn jujitsu. That's a service. I pay you money. You give me the service. We move on with the day, right? If I want to go somewhere else to learn that service, I'm not leaving this school. I could train it anywhere I want at any time. Why do I choose to stay here? Well, I like the people. I like the atmosphere. I have friends here. So I'll probably stay here, even if I go train in another studio. And if the person does leave, that's not a bad thing. Does it suck? Sure. As a business owner, you don't want to lose your business, but this is an opportunity for you to look and go, you know what? I hate to lose you, but I understand. Because you're going to have to see them again at the local jiu-jitsu tournament or local seminar. So why not pick their brain and say, hey, man, I know you're leaving. Was there something we could have done better? Like, could you explain maybe how we could have made this experience better for you? And then if you keep getting all the same people saying the same things, it's a business. Fix it. Like martial artists don't look at things, unfortunately, typically in the martial arts industry from a business mindset. They look at it from another mindset, and that's why a lot of schools close. And that's a shame. A lot of great martial arts studios close because they never took the time to say, well, I'm a black belt under so-and-so. I'm so proud of that every time I say I'm a black belt, I say I'm a black belt under this person. But then when you open up your school, you go, well, who's your business mentor? I'll figure it out. That's like the equivalent of saying that dude that comes in off the streets like, yeah, man, I want to be an MMA fighter. I got like 50,000 street fights. I'm undefeated. No one's going to believe that guy. No one's going to take him seriously. Everyone's going to probably laugh at him when he first comes in. He's probably going to get his ass whooped. You can't look at business that way. You have to look at business just like you looked at your martial arts education and say, you know what? When I started martial arts, I was a white belt. I didn't know what I was doing. A mentor, a group of people helped me learn how to develop my martial art technique. I should look at martial arts business the same way. I don't know what I'm doing. So why not learn from people who will help elevate me to get better at martial arts business? So one, I'm not ripping people off unintentionally. And two, I get to teach more people and be in business longer to do the thing that I love and spread that knowledge.
So off the topic, so there is a guy on YouTube. His name is Coffeezilla. He does the same thing you do for what you do for martial arts. He does for businesses. There are a bunch of fake gurus who try to become mentors for money. So people who also kind of should be aware of it. But let's get back. So now, nobody knows anything about you, as I said. Like I couldn't figure out your last name. I swear, like it took me a while to figure out. Like tell me a little bit about yourself. Like where are you from originally? Where were you grew up? And how did you discover martial arts? Besides the fact that it was your birthday gift for you.
Well, I guess the reason it was a birthday gift is kind of important. But so I was raised in Jacksonville, Florida. So that's where I'm from. That's probably why I have a little bit of a country twang every once in a while because I'm from the South. And then I grew up there. I was picked on and teased quite a bit as a child because I was born with a cleft lip and palate. So I was going through a lot of surgeries. And at that time, I had scars or stitches constantly from going in and out of surgeries. And I was picked on quite a bit as a child. Then when I went to middle school, I was in fights all the time, constantly. It was a kind of a rough school. I was easy. I stood out. I was an easy target for people. One day when I was in a gym class, a group of kids jumped me. They jumped me right after the bell rang. And so after the bell rang, it was like 5 or 6 kids. It's kind of hard to count when you're getting kicked in the face. I was being jumped by the kids. One kid stabbed me multiple times. I have like still a little piece of pencil lead marking on my finger. I was getting stomped on, like my glasses had broken and cut my face and stuff. And they were just beating me down. And 2 teachers actually stood there and watched the entire thing and did nothing about it. So after the second bell rang, which was the time between classes was 5 minutes. So I know they beat me for 5 minutes because they started when the bell rang for class to be over. And they didn't stop until the next bell rang, and then they all scattered. Once that happened, a friend of mine, still best friends today, love this dude to death. he comes up to me like late for the class because I was laying there bleeding, and I looked up and I can see him way down there, like trying to run towards me. But by the time he was coming, everybody had already scattered. And he picked me up and he handed me a card, and he was walking me to the nurse's office. So when he was walking me to the nurse's office, you know, he was making sure I was okay. We were buddies. He handed me a card, and the card was actually for karate. And he said the words, "You need this." Never forget it. That's exactly what he said. He said, "You need this." And he handed it to me, and I put it in my pocket, and I just went to the nurse's office. I went home after that. And my mom was super protective of me. She didn't want me to do basketball, football, soccer, none of that, because she was worried that I would get hit in the face with one of these things and damage my surgeries. I handed that to her. I told her that's what I wanted to do. I could tell that, you know, she obviously was concerned about what was going on. And then so she surprised me the next month with a paid in full year-long, you know, contract to a karate school. So I started training karate with my buddy, and then I've been doing that ever since. Now I'm a third-degree black belt in karate. I'm a third-degree black belt in something called Lissa Jodo, which is a weapon system not too many people have heard of. That's the nunchuck stuff you see. You can look up my instructor. His name is Lee Barden. You can look him up on YouTube. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 6-0 amateur boxer, 4-2 amateur kickboxer. I was on an international kickboxing team for 2 years called Team Full Circle, where we traveled internationally and did sport martial arts tournaments and kickboxing tournaments. I ran a martial arts studio for 4 years. I've been an instructor for the majority of the time since I was like 17 is when I started actually teaching martial arts. And so I've been teaching since then. Now I do McDojoLife full time, which I've been doing for about 9 years. And I've been doing martial arts business consulting for about a decade.
Wow. So you know a thing or two about martial arts. Good. That's
Hopefully, just well, hopefully in that time I learned something.
that's
You
awesome.
know,
So
you know what I learned in all that time? Honestly, I learned in all that time. I don't know shit. Like, I learned there's so much to learn that I don't think that I'll have time in a lifetime to learn. But I just know that there's always somebody better than me, and I know there are plenty of people with better resumes than me. And I just know that the only thing that I have above anyone else in this entire industry is the fact that I love martial arts the way that I love martial arts. And that doesn't take away from anybody else's credentials. It doesn't take away from anybody else's experiences or their love. But I just have my own way of looking at things for me to make me happy in this industry.
so you touched on the subject of you being beaten and picked on. So let's say there's somebody watching this video and they have kids and their kids being bullied. You've seen a whole bunch of different martial arts, and obviously some of them are more effective than others. Which ones you think should be, um, which are the most effective? Let's just say, put it that way, and it's the shortest period of time.
Okay, well, first I have to preface this with stop using the word bullying because it's the most toxic word you could ever use. Bullying is a stupid ass word. Bullying is a dumb word because what happens is when you say the word bullying, you're trying to take all of these things that are already illegal and you're turning them into a word that there is no law for. If someone beats you up, it's battery. There's a law against it. You can solve that. If you call battery bullying, there's no more law. You can't solve it. If somebody is harassing you, that's harassment. If somebody is stalking you, that's stalking. And what people like to do is they like to take all these different words, right? And they like to sum them up into bullying, right? That's just not how that works. So I think bullying is the dumbest word ever created because what it does is it downplays the actual seriousness of whatever the events were. And if it doesn't fall into any of those categories, then it's not bullying. You know, it's like, you know, it just always blows my mind how easy that word is tossed around. And that's no down or slight to you. It's just my personal view of how bullying is being used so commonly. And that's causing so many situations that normally would have been able to have been solved, but now are no longer solvable because now it's bullying and not assault. You know, no, that's assault. Stop calling it bullying. But that would be step one. So if you have kids, stop using the word bullying so damn much.
Let's say they've been assaulted and constantly being picked on, and by picked on I mean like the ball. Like to me, I'm from Russia, and to us, I didn't hear about word bullying either. It's like boys being boys, they always pick on each other, right? You end up in a situation where you realize that your son being picked on. Which school do you take him to?
I'd take him to every trial class that I could and find the school that he has the most fun with. And I know that might not seem the most advantageous, but there's a lot more to this than just kicking and punching. One, in order for that person to want to continue to practice martial arts, they have to like it. So if I keep sending my kid to, like, let's say the most effective, like, let's say if I started picking like jujitsu or sambo or these hard no or boxing or kickboxing or Muay Thai, and I put them in these hard nosed schools that they hate, they're not going to practice. They're going to resent you and they're going to hate doing that. So that means they're going to suck. And then they're going to know just enough to get hurt. And that's not healthy. So at the end of the day, I would look at past this because most likely they're going to spend more time training than they will defending themselves. So what am I going to do with that? Do I send my kid to a place that they hate so that they resent it and they never actually train so they don't get good at it anyway and I waste money? Or do I take my kid to as many trial classes as I can and we shop and we go, hey, which class did you enjoy? And they say, man, I like this one, and this one. And then you go, okay, well, out of these three, let's see which one would be most effective for what our goals are as parents. What's your goal for your kid? The average martial artist drops out after a year. So the chances are good when you put your kid into any martial arts program, he's going to quit. And that's not everybody, but that's just the facts. Those are statistics. I don't make them up. So he goes into a studio. What do you want him to get out of a year? And that's what you should start worrying about. What's the goal? If the goal is self-defense, all right, which one did you enjoy the most that's the most beneficial for self-defense and do that one? But even then, like let's say your child has cerebral palsy. Let's say your child has Down syndrome. Let's say your child's missing an arm. Let's say your child has some type of debilitating disease. Then what? I can't pick a martial art. That doesn't make sense. Because if I pick an individual martial art, that's not going to solve his disability or her disability. What I should be looking at is there's a bigger picture here than the possibility of getting into 1 or 2 fights in their entire life. What am I doing with those other hours upon hours upon hours of their life? Did I put them in something that they're going to resent me for and hate me for, that I forced them to do because it's street effective? Maybe the coach is abusive, but I stay there because it's more street effective. To me, that logic just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if we're talking about goal driven, that makes more sense. And if you're saying self-defense, okay, that makes sense. If that's the goal. But there are usually more goals than that.
Let's talk self-defense. Because I'm trying to pull out of you the effectiveness.
You're trying to get one answer for something that there is no one answer for. Yes. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get me to say, all right, it's jiu-jitsu or it's sambo.
Yes.
That's not a real thing. Whoever controls and dictates the range of combat wins the fight. That's how fights work. Position overall, right? And in jiu-jitsu, the rule is position, transition, submission. But position always dictates who wins the fight. Like if I'm standing on the ground and we're in World War II and a bomb drops on me, guess who won? The guy who had the dominant position. Like position wins all the time. So look at somebody like Raymond Daniels, for instance, who's jump spinning, hook kicking people and knocking them out. Look at guys like Stephen Thompson or Michael Venom Page who are using sport karate and knocking out jiu-jitsu black belts. It's more than just the art. I know we want it to be. I know we want that simple answer. It's just a lie. It's the biggest lie in the martial arts industry. It's a lie. Like, look at guys who get like taken down and then dominated on the ground. I love Israel Adesanya. Israel Stylebender, I love that dude. One, he supported the page since day one. He's a phenomenal kickboxer, right? Great champion in the UFC. What happened in this last fight? He got taken down, right? Who was winning when he was standing? Like whoever dictates range of combat wins. So to say that one art wins overall is just a lie, especially nowadays, because most arts are blended a lot more than they ever were before.
Yeah.
We're no longer in the time of like karate versus jiu-jitsu, go. It's usually, more, even karate guys now are more educated in basic grappling skills. They know what the guard is, they know a basic sweep. So no, there is no one answer. So you're never going to get that from me.
Got it. Well, thank you. So let's lighten up a little bit. So I'm gonna have a quick blitz with you. And
yeah, for sure. Blitz me.
Yeah. No, it's about other stuff. Like I'm gonna quick question. You give me a quick answer, whatever comes to your mind.
For sure.
Okay. Favorite martial arts? No, I'm kidding. No, that's not What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie? Oh man, you hit me with a hard one. I've watched like The Martian more than I probably should. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why. But that's one. But if we're talking like martial arts movie, I love that corny movie, The Last Dragon. Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. I just love how corny and bad it is that I just like it.
What's your favorite song?
I don't really have a favorite song, to be honest. I've never man, I can't wait to hear that one song. I don't think I have one, to be honest.
Any favorite sport outside of martial arts in general?
Oh man, there are other sports outside of martial arts.
Next question.
um, no, man. You know what's really interesting? I love these like these off-brand sports that you never hear about that are like cultural. Like
like what?
there was like one sport where it's like an old, I think it might have been a Mayan sport where they have this little tiny ball and they had like this like stone hoop that's not the, yeah, the Aztec sport. Yeah, my producer, the director was just telling me. But it's a sport where they just try to take this ball and they have to throw it through this little tiny concrete hole. That kind of stuff. You know, there are other things that are out there where it's like basically like almost like football in a way, but it takes place in like a small town, I think in Italy, where like once a year, like it's a team of like just two teams to get together, and it's basically full contact MMA, but the goal is to try to get the ball to the other side. I love like um these odd sports that are from very specific regions and cultures that no one ever really hears of, but they still exist. I love that shit.
Gotcha. What's your favorite country to visit?
Favorite country to visit? Man, I really am looking forward to getting back to London. But I have to say, like, I had a good time in Canada too. Like, I went to the Quebec Open for kickboxing. I really had a good time there. Um, you know, Mexico is kind of cool, but it's a little shady, so that's a little weird sometimes. Like, depending, like, you can Mexico is cool, but you just got to make sure you stay in certain areas. But yeah, man, I'm actually looking forward to getting back to London.
What's the first item on your bucket list?
First item on my bucket list. Well, right now we're doing one of them, which is to make this documentary. Then I want to make a book. I want to write a book, and then after that, I want to do a show. So I want to do a show about rites of passages into manhood, and so I want to go and do all these different rites of passages into manhood from different cultures.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. So when is the documentary going to be completed?
It's a solid question. Well, we started editing yesterday, and then we did
Nice.
more editing today. We still have some filming we still need to do to fill in some holes. So hopefully we'll be able to start knowing a little bit more probably in April as to where we're going to be. But I think that we'll be in a pretty good place by mid-April, at least in terms of first draft editing and stuff like that.
And so if people who want to support what you do, is there a page where they can go and donate or something they can actually buy your stuff?
Well, yeah, for sure. If they want to go to McDojoLife on pretty much any social media platform, except for Reddit, somebody actually took McDojoLife before I made McDojoLife as like a subreddit page. So now on Reddit, it's the McDojoLife. You'll spot it. It'll be the one with like almost 10,000 followers, not the one with like 30 regular, just 30 followers. But yeah, man, there's usually a link in the bio for any of these pages, and it'll let you know, like, hey, if you want to purchase a shirt or if you want to follow McDojo Life DOC, which is our private page for people who donated for our documentary, you can do that too. But you know what? At the end of the day, man, like if you really want to support the page, just enjoy martial arts. Try to share the love of it. You know, try to make sure that if you see somebody doing some stuff that'll get somebody hurt, that you call it out. You know, like that's real support, is the fact that the community can come together and actually make the community a better place.
Got it. Well, Rob, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, dude, I love talking shop. I appreciate you having me on. You actually have some really good questions, and it was a good conversation, dude. I appreciate you.
Thanks.